Hi, my name's Phil. I like to talk about politics. And during the local election campaign, Nigel Farage urged people to vote Reform UK in order to fix their councils. Well, people did exactly that, and quite a few. So Reform UK now have control of multiple councils, including two bordering my own rather nervous-looking council. So with a well-worked-out plan for improvements, I'm sure they were keen to get stuck in. Only there seems to be wide reports from multiple Reform-controlled councils of Reform UK's newly elected councillors just not showing up for work. But first, for daily news and politics, please hit the subscribe button to stay notified. So Reform UK have majority control, I think, of 9 councils, and then I think minority control of another 3. So they're basically leading a dozen councils. Now, in the 9 where they have a majority at least, they've got complete carte blanche to run things the way they like, as long as it's legal, of course. And when a new party has taken over, you expect them to get to work straight away, don't you? I mean, the champion at the bit, of course they're going to get to it. Like Labour, when they won the general election last year, they were so desperate to get stuck in, they asked MPs to vote to sacrifice some of their summer recess to get legislation moving sooner rather than later. They were keen to get at it. They've been waiting years, right? Obviously, with a large majority, they did that, so that it was a shorter summer recess. So Labour got stuck in immediately. No time to find the feet or wander around, straight into rolling up their sleeves, getting on with the hard work. So with Reform UK winning its own power for the first time since their UKIP days, and considerably more power than they had back then, you'd have thought they would get stuck in just like Labour did nationally the year before, right? Only it turns out they think they need more time to prepare. More time to prepare? They've had years to prepare. If they didn't actually know what they're doing, perhaps they should have mentioned that during their campaign. Reportedly, the worst offenders are Kent and Nottinghamshire. Maybe that's why Yusuf visited Kent last week, to give them all warnings for non-attendance. Although I suspect not. He clearly made no mention of it. In fact, by all accounts, Zia Yusuf and Aaron Banks, neither of whom are elected, have spent more time at Kent County Council than most of the party's councillors. Actually, it is possible that we're being a bit unfair. See, I did see someone suggest that maybe the reason these Reform councillors are struggling to drag their knuckles to council meetings is because they couldn't read the invites. Of course, the reality here is that this was inevitable. Normally, when a council changes leadership, the newly dominant party already had some experienced councillors in opposition, right? So they provide the leadership and mentor the new councillors in their party. But Reform have, in many of these councils, gone from 0 councillors to enough to take control. And even where they did have some experience from defecting Conservative councillors, for example, they decided not to take advantage. Take Durham. There were 3 candidates to lead the council. There was a failed businessman, there was Darren Grimes, and there was a defected Conservative councillor. They made the failed businessman the leader. They made Grimey the deputy leader. So basically, the guy with experience got nowhere. They showed no interest in prioritising that experience and knowledge. Another problem is that councillors aren't paid a wage as such, unlike MPs. There's like some compensation for your time, but you're not giving up your job for it. So there's a suggestion that maybe Reform UK haven't been able to appoint people to the necessary committees because finding someone who can turn up for a meeting in the daytime is proving tricky. Maybe they should have thought about that while selecting candidates. Got a certain number of them to say, yeah, I can actually turn up to meetings. They must have known in which wards they stood the best chances. They should have made sure they had enough councillors who would have had the time to attend meetings. And if that is part of the problem, it's not likely to improve anytime soon. If someone has to work when the meetings are being held, then they're basically permanently unable to sit on that committee unless they have a very accommodating employer. Or just do what Farage did, I suppose. Be appointed to the committee, but just don't turn up to meetings. Like he did on the EU Fisheries Committee when he was pretending to give a shit about British fishermen whilst not turning up to represent them ever. Naturally, opposition parties have called this lack of attendance shambolic, disgraceful, usual thing. Reform UK have labelled their complaints as just opposition whining. And yes, opposition councillors are always going to say that the controlling councillors are messing everything up, and the controlling councillors are always going to say that they're just carping from the sidelines. But Reform UK claim to have a plan to turn failing councils around, and now they're claiming they're having to cancel all these meetings because they're not ready. Why aren't they ready? That's the question that needs to be asked. Why aren't they ready? And if the reason for cancellations is because it suddenly dawned on them that they don't have enough councillors to fill the committee positions who can meet in the daytime because they selected too many vampires or workers, then that really is a shit show which needs amplifying. Mind you, the councils where this is happening may be the lucky ones. In Lincolnshire, next door to me, one of the highest flood risk parts of the country, you get hundreds, sometimes thousands of homes flooded every year. Reform UK did turn up to a meeting. Do you know what they decided to do in that meeting? We're going to save some money. How are we going to save money? Let's scrap the flooding committee. I guess that's one way of avoiding needing people to sit on the committee. But it means they're going to save money by scrapping flood planning and prevention in a county that has one of the highest flood risks in the country, where every year businesses and homes will get flooded. So maybe those opposition councillors in other counties should stop complaining. Absenteeism does way less damage than actually turning up when you're being run by Reform UK. However, this does also highlight the risk of letting Reform UK control anywhere. Imagine if they did win the next general election. They'd go from 5 MPs, who don't exactly seem like they're spending any time learning anything, to over 300 overnight. Farage will have to run the country and appoint complete novices to run entire government departments. Now, given that the more experienced MPs often complain that putting policy into practice is a lot harder than they thought, Keir Starmer was whining about that earlier this year. Imagine what it would be like for Team Moron. Which is not to say that a Reform UK government will be neutered. Don't think, oh, well, it won't be too bad then. It will still do immense damage. They will still try to wreck everything. They will smash everything up. They just won't know how to build it back again. It may not succeed in some of their grander ambitions like privatising the NHS, because when it comes down to it, that'll probably be more complicated than they realise. But that'll be no silver lining if they just destroy it completely in the attempt. Of course, Reform UK supporters may well point out that, oh, Phil, look, a few weeks it's not enough time to judge them on council leadership. Give them a break. Okay, sure. What? Okay, fine. Though I think the least we could have expected for them in the first few weeks was to at least turn up for work. You might not have expected them to suddenly change everyone's standard of living. Of course not. We could have at least expected them to turn up for work. Like if you take on a new employee, you might not expect them to prove themselves beyond doubt in a few weeks. I mean, probation periods are usually longer than a few weeks. You at least expect them to attend. But sure, yes, it will take a while before we can have a proper progress report. But perhaps later this year, I do hope people pay careful attention to their actions. Oh, and if you're in one of the flood risk parts of Lincolnshire, yeah, maybe now's a good time to sell up and move. Maybe be careful not to do it to just another Reform-led council, though. All one up for grabs next year. Steer clear of them. Of course, what's going to happen in Lincolnshire and Kent will be like a beautiful dream compared to what is going to come in the future. And it almost doesn't matter if it's the next general election or not. Remember, experts are clear. It's now possible for mad results in elections with 3 parties able to form a majority and others taking a large chunk of the remaining votes. If we don't change our electoral system for a more representative and stable one, we can easily go from hardly any Reform UK MPs to enough to form a majority government. Then we're all bound. Maybe I could persuade my wife to move to Ireland. But let me know what you think in the comments below. And for more content, you could subscribe to the channel or even become a member for access to streams and behind the scenes updates. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.